Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a massive escalating threat across Europe, extreme heat, and taking a close look at a really groundbreaking AI solution that's actually designed to save lives. You know, we've all seen the flashy headlines about record-breaking temperatures, right? But what happens when the heat becomes a silent mass casualty event? And, well, more importantly, how in the world do we stop it?
Let's kick things off with a number that is just, honestly, it's staggering. 60,000. That is the estimated human toll, the literal number of people across Europe who lost their lives directly because of extreme heat during the summer of 2022. It's a totally sobering figure, and it proves that heat waves are now causing more deaths in Europe than all other natural hazards combined.
Which brings us right to the core question of our explainer today. As these climate events get more and more intense, how do governments and local communities actually anticipate which heat waves are going to turn fatal? Think about it. If we don't know exactly when and where the heat will become deadly, how can we possibly deploy emergency resources to protect the people who need it most?
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll look at 1. Europe's deadly heat problem. 2. The climate adaptation gap. 3. The challenge of prediction. 4. AI early warning systems. And finally, 5. Building a resilient future.
Okay, starting with Section 1, Europe's deadly heat problem. Warming at twice the global average. Look at this stark contrast, it's absolutely wild. The baseline climate has shifted so radically that atmospheric circulation patterns from 50 years ago are now producing vastly hotter and significantly deadlier realities today. To put that into perspective for you, back in 1976, the temperatures Europe is experiencing right now in June, they would have been virtually impossible. Today, the hottest daily temperatures are warming at roughly triple the global rate, and nighttime temperatures, which by the way are absolutely crucial for our bodies to recover from daytime heat, are warming at twice the rate.
And beyond the very real human cost, the economic toll is accelerating at a really alarming pace. Check this out. Between 1980 and 2024, the European Union registered 822 billion euros in total losses from extreme weather. But here's the kicker. A full 25% of those historical losses happened in just the last 4 years alone. That's a huge chunk. It's a crystal clear sign that both the extreme events themselves and the massive financial damage they cause are intensifying super fast.
Moving on to Section 2, the climate adaptation gap, why local governments are struggling.
With the stakes being this high, we have to ask, how prepared are our communities? Well, the crucial point here is that Europe's smaller municipalities are severely lagging behind. These areas are home to over 40% of the EU's entire population. Yet, and this is kind of shocking, only 16% of them actually have formal adaptation action plans in place. They are essentially fighting a massive crisis with their hands tied. They have limited financial and human resources, reduced access to knowledge networks, and honestly, really unclear legal responsibilities about who actually owns the climate risk.
This quote from the European Environment Agency pretty much hits the nail on the head. We have a clear opportunity to protect people, but the data out there is incredibly fragmented. You know, local leaders might know in their gut that their communities are at risk, but without the right data, they can't effectively measure if their new cooling centers or emergency protocols are actually doing anything to keep people safe.
Which brings us to Section 3, the challenge of prediction, the hidden numbers of heat mortality.
To really understand why this massive data gap exists, we have to talk about the main villain of our story today, which is the sheer statistical nightmare of predicting heat-related mortality. It all comes down to how we define and track deaths. The gold metric we are desperately looking for is called excess mortality. That's the number of deaths directly caused by the heat wave, above what we'd normally expect. But the problem? Official records usually just give us all-cause mortality, which lumps every single death together. It makes it incredibly tough for early warning systems to isolate and predict the hidden excess deaths that were actually triggered by the heat.
So this right here is the core gap in our public health infrastructure. Projecting the weather, that's routine. We can look at a map and say, yep, it's going to be 40 degrees Celsius next Tuesday. But projecting the actual lethality of that weather without perfectly clean historical data on heat-specific deaths, that's been a massive hurdle for policymakers. They need to know exactly when to sound the alarm, but historically, the data has just been way too blurry to make that call.
All right, Section 4, AI Early Warning Systems, Introducing Deep Therm.
This data limitation we just talked about is exactly where cutting-edge technology steps into the picture. Enter Deep Therm. This is a highly specific, data-driven solution developed by researchers. It's a modular early warning system designed to predict deadly heat waves without relying on those elusive, exact heat-related mortality records we were just complaining about. Instead of needing perfect past data, it cleverly uses historical all-cause mortality, standard non-mortality records like temperature and humidity, and near-future weather forecasts to generate its warnings.
Let's peel back the curtain on how this dual prediction strategy actually works, because it's pretty brilliant. It's a three-step process. First, a mathematical model, specifically a quasi-Poisson regression model, uses long-term data to predict a stable baseline, so basically figuring out how many people would normally pass away on a given day without a heat wave. At the exact same time, a deep learning module analyzes weather and short-term records to predict the total, all-cause mortality. Finally, the AI simply subtracts the baseline from the total. What's left over? That hidden excess ratio of deadly heat. And the results are genuinely robust. When researchers tested deep therm in Spain, specifically hunting for major level 1 heat waves, where heat-related mortality spikes more than 15% above the baseline, the system successfully detected 80% of them. And just as importantly, it did this with a false alarm rate of less than 15%. Keeping that false alarm rate low is absolutely vital, because if you're constantly crying wolf, the public gets fatigued and you end up wasting precious emergency resources.
Now, looking at these maps from the testing across Spain, you can see that the system maintains this high predictive accuracy across vastly different geographical regions and super diverse climate conditions. It's working effectively everywhere, from the breezy coastal cities right into the sweltering inland capitals.
So, what is the key takeaway here? Is that deep therm isn't just some abstract concept sitting in a scientific paper. It is a highly practical tool. It actually has customizable alarm thresholds. That means local policymakers can balance their own tolerance for false alarms versus missed alarms based entirely on their specific budgets and resources. On top of that, it has high demographic generalizability, meaning it works great for both the under 65 crowd and the 65 and over populations, all while using data that national agencies are already collecting anyway.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, Building a Resilient Future, Bridging the Gap Between Data and Action.
So let's connect all this incredible AI technology back to the real world. We know that right now, 45% of European cities are breaking their indoor thermal thresholds during heat waves. Our buildings literally cannot handle this new climate baseline. To adapt, we've got to combine equitable policies, like retrofitting our aging buildings for passive cooling, with much better funding and governance for those small municipalities that are struggling. Integrating predictive AI systems like deep therm into our national policies isn't just a nice-to-have anymore. It is essential public health infrastructure.
I am going to leave you with this provocative final thought. We are currently locked in a very high-stakes race between a rapidly changing climate baseline and our own human technological ingenuity. Tools like deep therm prove that we absolutely have the capability to see the danger coming, even when the underlying data is super messy. But the big question remains, will we actually deploy these early warning systems and adapt our cities fast enough to protect our most vulnerable before the next record-breaking summer hits? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.